It's the Geeky Waffle Podcast.
Thea, I'm so excited to have you here. Thank you so much for coming on.
Hi, Arezou. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I'm so glad that we're finally talking after all these years of knowing each other and seeing each other on Twitter. I'm so glad that we are finally having an actual spoken conversation.
Me too. This one feels like it was a long time coming.
I know.
All right. We are going to kick this off with the broadest question I have.
All right.
Tell me about your journey as a writer, however you want to interpret that.
Well, so writing was always my hobby. It was the one thing that I never stopped doing ever since I was in grade school. I was probably in first grade when I started writing my stories, and then I had a poetry phase, but we don't talk about that. I think I'm much better at prose than I am at poetry. So yeah, I basically wrote every day for a really long time, but I never allowed myself to think of it as a viable career. It was not an option, growing up in an Asian family in Asia. Yeah. And what to make matters worse, both my parents are doctors, and all my aunts and uncles are either doctors or lawyers.
Mm-hmm.
And my grandparents were lawyers. So it just, I just never allowed myself to believe that it was an option, that to go into the arts was an option. I never let myself think that. But I kept writing on the side, original stories at first, and then I discovered fan fiction. And so that was my life for the past decade, I think. When I started working in an office, I would write fanfic during my lunch breaks. It was obviously Reylo fanfic, the thing that brought us together. Yeah, but I cannot stress enough how I really had another career path in mind. But then the pandemic happened and lockdown happened. I think the Philippines had the world's longest lockdown, or one of the world's longest. And so it was several months of me just sitting at home, and I had a lot of time to think. I had a lot of time to have an existential crisis. Am I really happy with where my life is going? Is this what I really want to do? And then it just so happened that an editor reached out and asked me if I had ever thought about working on an original novel. And I was like, you know what? I have nothing on the agenda for the next several months because we're all stuck here at home. So yeah, let's give it a try. And ever since then, I haven't looked back. I think my parents went through the 5 stages of grief when I finally told them my plans. Because before this, I was supposed to go on to a diplomatic career. I was supposed to take the foreign service exam, things like that. Which is still not like being a doctor or a lawyer, but it was acceptable. So I think
second tier.
I think my family went through the 5 stages of grief, but I think that they're slowly starting to come around to the fact that I'm not going to be. I think they're coming around to the fact that I am going to be the first artist in the family. So yeah, they said they're excited to read my book, and I'm like, okay, and I guess all's well that ends well. I definitely know that I am happier now than I was compared to when I was just going through the motions of something that I think I was good at, but it wasn't where my heart was. So yeah, all's well that ends well, I suppose.
You saying you had a poetry phase makes a lot of sense, because when everybody listening to this gets to read the Hurricane Wars, and if they've, read your other writing, then they are familiar with how poetic your prose can get sometimes. So hearing you had a poetry phase, I'm like, yes, that's why her brain works that way.
okay, one of these days I will share my grade school poetry with the world, but I'm not ready yet. But I do think that poetry helped me a lot in finding my voice when it comes to
Mhm.
prose, because I read, it was a new format for me. Like I forgot the term, but like the non-traditional poems, the ones that don't rhyme,
Free verse.
the one, yeah, free verse, the ones that don't have like a set meter or a set pattern or something. I think discovering that was what really opened my eyes to the many ways that language could be played with, and in the many ways that it could convey emotion even in like a non-traditional pattern. So yeah, I think my poetry phase really really helped improve my writing skills.
So you mentioned we became friends because of Reylo, the greatest.
Yeah.
But enemies to lovers is not a one-time thing. It is a
Oh yeah.
lifestyle. So
Mhm.
I need to know, what was your gateway enemies to lovers?
Well, so my gateway to enemies to lovers is sort of connected to how I discovered fan fiction in general. My my friend, and we were in sophomore year of high school. My friend, my classmate, brought along like this folder with something printed inside, and I was like, "What is this?" I said, "Oh, this is called fan fiction." so, so I read it. I was like, okay, so it's like it's two characters who don't have a relationship in canon, like in the actual media, but in fan fiction, you can make them do this and do that. You can make them do whatever you want. And then she was like, yes, that's fan fiction. And so I was like, oh, that's cool. And then so it was, it was a Draco Ginny fanfic.
Okay.
Yeah, but I guess it opened the avenue for me to start exploring more ships in the Harry Potter fandom. And so eventually I stumbled upon Draco Hermione, and
Hmm.
that was pretty much where I stayed. Although, like, well, it's Harry Potter isn't what it used to be anymore. So yeah, so after Draco Hermione, I guess I moved on to like Zuko Katara. That
Yes.
was Yes, I think that was like my all-consuming passion for several years. And then after Zuko Katara, I had this I don't know if you're familiar with the 100.
Vaguely.
Oh yeah, okay. Well, I had this Belark phase, so shout out to any Belark.
Balark, I know.
Yeah, it was so good. And then after Belark, I fell into Reylo because I watched The Force Awakens. And then I've never looked back since. I think when I after I watched The Force Awakens, that was when I started posting my fanfics on Tumblr and then AO3. So yeah, that was really what got me firmly entrenched in like a sort of fandom community.
And haven't looked back since, because what a
Yeah,
community it is.
exactly. It's been so life changing.
Okay, let's talk Hurricane Wars.
Yeah.
First of all, let's talk about our feral duo. I'm I've only ever seen their names reading it, so
Mm.
I don't know where to put the stress. Taliesin? My
Well,
brain's trying to convert it to Persian. And I'm like, I probably shouldn't do that.
I think Persian and Filipino have the same stresses. I mean, I just say Taliesin.
Okay, so that's what I'm
It's probably
Taliesin and Alaric.
yeah,
So
Alaric.
yeah, love them so much. So what is it you think about these two that is going to resonate so well? Like, what is it about this duo?
Well, I think that readers might gravitate to the fact that they're both, well, even though they're on opposite sides, with all the conflict and the tension that entails. I think that, well, I hope that readers will sort of resonate with the fact that they're both just like two really, really lonely people. They've never really had anyone who was purely in their corner and not just for the sake of winning a war or attending or achieving some kind of end goal. I think that deep down they both just want to be accepted for who they are, and they just want someone to understand them. So I think the whole Hurricane Wars trilogy is sort of moving them towards that. But of course, they have a lot of obstacles to overcome along the way. First, the greatest of all being that they hate each other. So yeah, they hate each other and they want to kill each other at first. So after they get over that, yeah, that's when they start like gradually inching together, in the sense that they're like, oh wow, this person like understands me. This person can sometimes make me smile, and that's very rare. It's things like, it's like little things like that. It was really important for me to be able to craft like an organic softening towards each other, and like they just had to get there. They couldn't get there really fast because of their nation's history, because of the war that they were fighting. Like they had to just very slowly inch towards that kind of understanding. And yeah, I think that was part of the reason that the first book was so challenging for me to write, because it was the process of getting there and making sure I hit every beat, every nuance in their interactions. But hopefully I've done a good job, and I hope that readers will enjoy the journey.
So talking about this kind of like hitting the beats, you have like their personal push-pull, and you have like the magic system and the politics, and then there's the war going on in the background. So can you talk about like, I guess, your process to striking a balance between all of these elements?
Well, so what I did was, so it was a matter of balancing the world building, the plot, and the character interactions. I can honestly say that the first draft was like, it was just purely character interactions. Like that was the main focus. It was no thoughts, just vibes. Like, like I just wrote down like all the scenes that I wanted to put, the scenes between Alaric and Taliesin, and then it was my editors who put in their notes like, oh, this world building needs to be improved and things like that. So I think like, so in the first round, I focused on the character interactions. The second round was the world building. And then in the third round, my editors were like, we need to raise the stakes. There needs to be more critical motivations, critical goals. And I was like, okay. And so that was where tightening up the plot came in.
Okay.
And then the next round was just refining the character interactions, adding more steamy moments, ramping up the tension. Yeah, so what I've learned is that, like, I don't know how it works for other writers, but for me, like, creating a completed draft, it has to happen in stages for me. Mm-hmm. Like, I can't create something perfect or something completely satisfying in one go around. Like, I need to go back and I need to edit and stuff. I think it was easier when I was writing fanfic because like, it's more low stakes in a way, because you know that there will be an audience for it because people already know and love the characters. But for original fiction, you have to make sure that people will be invested in your new characters and your new world. So yeah, it was a lot of pressure.
I'm gonna say for fanfic too, like, you don't have to build the world from the ground up. But in this case, because this is fantasy, you very much did have to construct the whole world as well. So I wonder if you can talk a bit about kind of building now this entire world and this magic system sort of from scratch.
Well, it started out, so when I started out with conceptualizing this world, it was very generic. Like, it was generic Western fantasy. Like, like the names were like old English names, stuff like that. Because I don't know, like, it just never occurred to me that I could infuse my own culture into it. I think because, like, I'm a huge fantasy fan. Like, I grew up reading like Lord of the Rings, Ursula K. Le Guin, stuff like that. And Chronicles of Narnia and all that. So that was the main source of media that I was inundated with growing up. And I guess it never just occurred to me that I could pattern a fantasy book after my own culture. Like I didn't think I was allowed to. And so the world of that very first draft of the early stages of the Hurricane Wars, it was very uninspired. Like I was not invested in it at all. I think I even went around telling people that I don't really care about the world. It's the characters I'm invested in. But like obviously that was not working out in the long run. Like you have to care about everything in your book if you really want to do your best in writing it.
Mhm.
So it was my agent actually, Thao. She's Vietnamese American. So she was the one who suggested, "Hey, why don't you make the world like based in Southeast Asia?" And I
Okay.
was like, "Oh, I didn't know I could do that." I didn't know I was allowed. And so yeah, so from there, it sort of that was when for me, that was when the writing process really took off because now I was interested in the world and not just the two characters. Now I was writing what I knew, writing what I loved, and I was infusing into the story the aspects of my culture that I'm very proud of and that I think like deserve to be on a greater stage. And it was also in using my culture that I was able to develop like a better magic system.
Mhm.
Like in the sense that I was able to formulate the rules of the magic system because there's so a thing here with us is that here in the Philippines, we are mostly an agricultural economy, or well, a large part of our economy is based on
Mhm.
agriculture, and so our fates and our fortunes are intrinsically tied to how well the land does.
Right.
Yeah, so that was an important theme to me in the world of the Hurricane Wars, like how the land can be a source of magic, but at the same time, it can also be like you have to take care of it because if you don't, then yeah, then it'll be then like the fields will dry up, the like the resources will be wasted
Mhm.
and things like that. So yeah, and it's also about learning. So in the Hurricane Wars, magic is like the way to utilize magic. It's treated as a finite resource, and it's part of what caused the war because one side was running out of that resource. And so yeah, so they tried to invade the other side to get their hands on more resources. So I think like that was really like one of the fundamental things. I was tying into it how my people's lives are affected by our relationship with the land.
Okay. I like, yeah, I had not considered that till you said it, but like thinking back now, like with like the drain on the power and how they get
Yeah.
it and how they recharge and like
Yeah.
it's all clicking.
And then I think that was when I also put the storm magic into it, that was also a very like heavy reference to Philippine culture in general, Philippine culture and Southeast Asian culture in general, because we are in the Pacific Ring of Fire, so we get like a lot of natural calamities. Like we got so many typhoons passing through here every year. I think last month we had like 3 typhoons in succession. Like they all just yeah, they all just came raging through here. And so it got me so that it's that kind of experience that gets me thinking about how weapon can be a tool of like destruction. Like it can be a tool of oppression if it's harnessed by by not so good people. And that was where the idea for the storm ships was born.
I love that. So I know writing, editing, publishing is a very long process, but we're going to cast our mind back to when you were writing. I want to know if there was, in as spoiler-free a way as you can, what scene or moment or concept was the hardest for you to bring to life?
Well, I think it was all hard. It was my first debut. It was my first novel, so
Fair enough.
So there were a lot of days where I was just like, "Oh, I can't do this anymore." But I think I don't know. I think that in a way, the thing that I was most excited about to write, and the thing that I also had a hard time writing, they were kind of the same thing. Like, I think it was really the latter half of Alaric and Talas's relationship in book one that really stalled me for a while, because I just wanted it to be like a perfect combustion of everything, of every interaction that had been there before, like of what every interaction throughout the book had been leading up to. So I just wanted to make that as perfect as I could. Like, it couldn't be like when they finally, well, you've read the book, you know what I'm
Yes.
saying.
Yes.
When they finally get to let's say the next stage in their relationship, like I knew that it couldn't be sweet, because like it
Mhm.
couldn't be overly sweet, because that's not who they are. That's not what their relationship is. But at the same time, it also couldn't be so rough that it closed the door, towards anything more, towards anything deeper. So yeah, I think I spent like 2 weeks on that chapter alone.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Damn.
I was also a bit, well, okay, so I mean there was spice. So
Yes.
yeah, so I think like halfway through writing the spice, I was just hit by this realization that, oh my god, my family is going to read this.
Did that trip you up too? Going, oh no.
Well, I guess I mean, I was just like, oh no, my traditional Asian family is going to read this. But I don't know. I guess we'll cross that bridge when it comes. Like, well, I hope they don't bring it up. Knowing them, they probably won't bring it up.
But you'll know and they'll know and you'll know they
Yeah,
know.
yeah. It'll be like the ghost hanging over us at family reunions. Oh, I know your kinks.
So is that moment, I guess, is there a moment that you are most excited for readers to see? Because I know this is like asking you to pick like your favorite child, but
Oh yeah, it's definitely that chapter that we were talking about. Like,
okay.
I can't wait for readers to get there, and I hope it's like a satisfying payoff for. I've actually been getting a lot of messages and comments from the ARC readers. And their running theme is like, oh my god, this slow burn is killing me. So yeah, so I hope that the slow burn was like, I hope it wasn't too frustrating because of that chapter. So I hope, yeah, fingers crossed.
There's little payoffs before you get there. Like the scene in the garden with the
Oh,
fountain
yeah.
where he like picks her up. I'm like, help. And all he's done is like move her from point A to point B. And I'm sweating. I'm like, help me.
Oh, I also really like. So I also really like writing that scene. I kind of forgot about it when you asked me, because there's a lot of things about
There's
this
a
one
lot
that
in this book, to be fair.
I actually feel like it hasn't been published yet, but I feel like it was a lifetime ago. Like when I started writing book two, like right now I'm working on book two. I've been having to go back to my copy of book one and refreshing my memory on what happened whenever I wanted to like reference certain scenes in book one. I don't know. I think there's just so much going around in my head that when I was still writing fanfic, I could recall what I was writing. Like,
Right.
I didn't have to go back to earlier chapters. But I think, yeah, with an original novel, it's different because you're juggling so much, not just the character dynamics, but the world and the plot itself.
So I would be remiss if I did not mention your other story that just came out, Dune's New Songs of Salt and Moonlight, which is in the Return of the Jedi from a Certain Point of View anthology. So we met through Star Wars, so we got to talk about this for a minute. What was it like kind of getting that call?
Like I couldn't believe it was happening. Like I did not even think that it was a possibility because my book hadn't even been out yet. But I was so happy to get that call. And then when I accepted, I immediately rewatched Return of the Jedi. And it was like I rewatch Return of the Jedi maybe like once every couple of years. But and I always came back to it as like a fan, as like someone who really loves Star Wars. But this time when I was rewatching it, I was like, oh my God, I'm going to write for this. Like I could barely concentrate on what was happening. I was watching everything move around. I was, oh my God, this is so surreal. But yeah, it was just so great. And well, you know that I reference Wikipedia a lot in my fics. Yes.
Now you're on Wikipedia.
Oh yeah, and that was, I don't know, for me it was a huge moment. Like it was a full circle moment. And the Wikipedia account was like the Wikipedia account told me from referencing Wikipedia to being a source on Wikipedia. And I just had this like fangirl moment. Like I was running around my room. I was like, what is happening? How is this my life? So yeah, it was pretty great. And I loved working with my Star Wars editors. I think that all their inputs really helped make the story stronger.
Did you know from the outset, kind of when you were watching it, that you wanted to write in that first chunk, in like the Jabba's palace chunk, or did that kind of come to you later in the process?
No, not really, because what we were asked to do, was just pick a character, and they would be the ones to arrange it in the anthology. So okay. Yeah. So I actually before rewatching, I was actually thinking of like writing about the Ewoks or something. And I realized maybe a lot of people are going to write about the Ewoks. I should try to see if there's another angle that I want to approach this from. And I saw one of the dancers at Jabba's palace. I had not really noticed her before, but because this time I was looking out for every detail for possible characters that I could use, and then I saw her and she seemed cool. Like she had the blue streak in her hair, and her hair was really her hair was like platinum blonde, and overall she just looked really fierce. And I was like, okay, yeah, I'll write about her. Yeah, that was my thought process. I'm very shallow.
I mean, listen, she caught your eye, and then it's like what, the longest story in the anthology, or one of the longest stories in the anthology?
I know.
I don't say that is a bad thing.
I'm actually surprised. I'm actually surprised that they let me do that, because like when you think of a short story, you think like somewhere in the vein of like less than maybe around 5,000 words, maybe that amount, and then. So when I was writing, I just kept writing and writing, like more scenes kept coming to me. And then, I don't know, like when I sent it off to the editor, I was like, oh, you guys will probably want to trim this. It's long. But they didn't. So
okay. Do you remember how many words it was?
I think it was definitely above 10,000 words.
Damn.
Yeah.
Look, I'm not complaining.
I remember that the first draft was around 10,000 words, and then I had to add a scene at the beginning.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was definitely around that time. It was a scene that the editor suggested, so I guess they didn't mind the word length all that much.
All right, so as we wrap things up, you already mentioned you're working on book 2, but what is coming up for you?
There's Pub Day of the Hurricane Wars in the US, which is October 3rd, and it will be released in the UK on October 12th. And in November, I will be attending my first ever literary convention in London. YALC, the Young Adult Literary Convention. I'll be having a panel there with some other authors, and it will be an enemies to lovers panel. So it's another very full circle moment. And it's also going to be like a little tour. I will have book signings in Glasgow, Cardiff, and Liverpool, aside from the London stop. So it will be my first time in the UK. So I'm looking forward to that.
I'm sure, if you're listening to this episode, if you found this episode, you know where to find Thea. But where can people find you online?
Oh yeah. So my website is theaguanzon.com. It has all the necessary information. It has the links to all my socials, but also on Twitter, or rather X, and on TikTok, and on Twitter, TikTok, and Blue Sky, I am Thea G Writes. And then on Facebook, I have /words by Moonrise. And then I also have an authorly Tumblr. It's theaguanzon.tumblr.com.
Thank you so, so much. This was so much fun. I'm so excited for everybody to finally read this book.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor. I'm so happy that you enjoyed the Hurricane Wars and June Sea Songs of Salt and Moonlight.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. If you want to keep up with us, you can find us on Twitter at Geeky_Waffle. We are the Geeky Waffle on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Tumblr. We're the Geeky Waffle on YouTube. We're at thegeekywaffle.com. And we are on Patreon, patreon.com/thegeekywaffle. So thank you all again for listening. Thank you, Thea, and stay geeky.